Thank you, Acting President, and I rise to make a contribution on this bill, the Change or Suppression Conversion Practices Prohibition Bill 2020. And as I rise to make this contribution, I want to say to many in the LGBTIQ+ community today who may be watching this debate and may tune in to watch it later on, that I stand in solidarity with every single one of you, and am proud to be a member of the Andrews Labor government in supporting this bill into law. The debate that has gone on for the last few days, and certainly this was an election commitment of the Andrews Labor government. We announced that this would be something we would work on over the course of this term, and this was announced in the lead up to the 2018 election. And so this is not new. This is something that's been out there for a while. And as I said, I'm proud to be a member of the government, a very progressive Labor government that's going to bring an end to these abhorrent, unnecessary, unsupported by science or medical anything practices that all it does is cause immense harm and immense damage to people. I want to also acknowledge Ms Shing's earlier contribution as somebody from the LGBTIQ+ community. And as she said earlier, I think the only openly gay member of the caucus, and I want to acknowledge and recognise the emotion in her voice today and her contribution as a significant contribution that demonstrated for everybody in this chamber what it's like to live or to walk in the shoes of somebody who is an LGBTIQ+ member of that community. And I note it's interesting to me as well that I'm following Mr Finn's contribution over there, and I wanted to sit in the chamber to refute some of the comments that Mr Finn has made, because it's and I've listened. There's actually a theme in these contributions of not only the Liberal Party but the crossbenchers as well, that they're actually quite wrong and spreading misinformation. And there is a common theme, and what disappoints me about all of this is that the theme also is to pick a wedge, any wedge, a wedge that was, basically fanned by the Liberal Party and other supporters to basically, for Mr Davis to say here earlier today that the Liberal Party will be supporting this bill, yet to come in here and to say that they will move amendments, to come in here and drag this process out. Well, Mr Acting President, actions speak louder than words, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it when they sit here and say they support this bill, because they don't. Their actions speak otherwise. And I will watch with interest Mr Finn if he crosses the floor, as he's already foreshadowed that he will, and vote against this bill. And I note that none of the Liberal Party are actually in the chamber right now to hear the rest of this debate, and none of them were in here when you were speaking, Mr Finn, so that might say something about how they support you and what they think about your contribution. And I'm telling you that many people in Victoria also don't support your views and see your views and those of some of those views of those around you to be abhorrent. And again, I'm really disappointed and sad to see that, again, there's another debate that involves the LGBTIQ+ community that is about other people commenting on the way that they should live their lives. It is an absolute disgrace. So I'd really like to know how much money the Liberal Party has spent on fake websites generating all of these emails. There's no doubt there are absolutely people who have written to us about this, but there's also an equal number of people who have written to us supporting this bill. And the amount of emails at flooding day, and I know, Ms Patton, you would have copped an absolute barrage of them, and there is no doubt many of them are fake emails, but there's also a very clear indication that some of them are real. But this is about wedge politics. This is not about taking care of people, which is what the Andrews Labor government does and prioritises. So again, the Liberal Party picks an issue, any issue that's deeply personal to the LGBTIQ+ community, ignoring the immense distress that you will cause just so you can speak to yourselves, because that's what you're doing. You are just speaking to yourselves at the expense of the LGBTIQ+ community. You can't demonstrate leadership. You have nothing. You are so divided amongst yourselves with such deep divisions. You're incapable of leadership. Leadership on this issue would have meant that you would have come in here and showed bipartisanship and supported this legislation without amendment. So, and you propose these ridiculous amendments that are not going to get up. They are not going to get up. And as I said earlier, you will prolong this debate as long as you can. I was actually banking on being in here till 2 a.m. because that's what happens when the Liberal Party know that they're not going to get anywhere with something. They just drag everything out for the sake of it. Well, it's ridiculous, and your amendments are ridiculous. And this idea that we haven't consulted, it's going to stop people from praying, rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. And you know it's rubbish, but all you do is work on fanning fear and division within the community, because that's all you've got. All you want to do is speak to yourselves. No one else is listening to you. No one. No one listens to the rhetoric and to the rubbish. So again, this flies in the face of what you should be doing, which is supporting people in our community. So now, having said all of that, I'm going to just turn to, for a moment, to dispel some of the myths that you've been fanning. You and the Liberal Party have been fanning around this. We are not telling people they can't pray. This is not about that. And I'll turn to Mr Finn's comments about saying that we're going to stop medical practitioners talking to their patients and all of that. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. That is not true, okay? It is completely untrue. And again, what we've heard earlier today, that somehow this seems to be a choice, that a person's sexual orientation or gender identity is somehow a choice. It is not a choice. And this is what goes to exactly the heart of this legislation, is banning conversion, banning suppression or change therapy, because it doesn't work. You cannot suppress a person's true identity. People have the right to live their lives in whatever way they see fit without people commenting. And this is about patriarchy as well. This is about patriarchy, a system where, and you don't understand what that means, Mr Finn, because I get it, because you're laughing because you can't comprehend what it actually means. It means a system where, the majority of people can suppress the minority of people, and we're talking about the LGBTIQ plus community. That's what you need to think about here, but you don't want to, because anything will do that you can make, basically, like Ms Shing said earlier, make someone feel that they are other. They are not other. They are not broken. They do not need fixing. They are part of the Victorian community. And as I said earlier, these practices that this legislation goes to the heart of cause immense harm. There have been suicides of people who have gone through these practices. Many families broken, lives shattered, as I said, suicides, the whole thing. So this is about banning those practices. It's not about stopping someone honouring their religion or honouring their faith or praying or anything like that at all. And again, it's really disappointing and quite disgusting that and I've heard some of the crossbench contributions, and I've been quite frankly surprised and disgusted by some of these contributions. Again, quite wrong, even, to conflate a whole range of issues around homosexuality with paedophilia. Rubbish. I mean, completely offensive, completely and utterly offensive. And then for somehow to say this is all about religion and people being, not allowed to pursue their faith. Well, rubbish, absolute rubbish. One of the other ridiculous assertions that have been made here today is that trans kids are going to receive irreversible surgeries and medical interventions. If their parents don't agree, then they will be guilty of a change or suppression practice. Well, ridiculous. Firstly, trans kids, like all kids, should be able to live free from harm, and we know that the mental health of trans kids improves when they are affirmed and respected. There you go. It's about supporting people, not telling them that they're wrong or broken. In relation to the medical procedures clause, 5 subsection 2 of the bill, it sets out what is not a change or suppression practice, which includes a practice or conduct of a health service provider that is in a health service provider's reasonable professional judgment necessary to provide a health service. Now, I'm sure everyone else in this chamber has on many occasions been to a doctor, and I must say that a doctor has never prayed in a medical consultation with me. I would indeed be worried. And so the idea that conflates that when you go to the doctor, that the doctor's going to pray with you is rubbish. Again, complete rubbish. I agree with you, Ms Patton. If my doctor turned around and started praying, I would leave immediately, because that's not what I'm there for. I'm actually there for medical attention. Yeah, so, I'm sorry, again, another ridiculous notion that just completely confuses and confounds things. Like I said earlier, this is about wedge politics. This is about pick a wedge, any wedge, that's designed to, get maximum leverage and be we don't care. You know, the Liberal Party does not care about who it hurts along the way. As long as they can talk to themselves, as long as they can keep talking to themselves, that's what this is about. It's not about leadership. It's not about standing up. And I might comment on Ms Shing's contribution, and I was very grateful for her in reading out the names of the Liberal Party who did not turn up in the Assembly for when this bill went through. Oh, there was a long list of them. And then when Ms Shing was rudely interrupted on a ridiculous interjection from those opposite, sought by leave to have her contribution extended by the 4 or so minutes that it was wasted and interrupted, was denied leave. A petulant, pathetic, unnecessary, nasty tactic from the Liberal Party today. Again, true to form, tricky, nasty, not a leader, just a Liberal. Again, absolutely abhorrent, absolutely abhorrent. So again, this is about supporting individuals. So parents of trans kids might want to take a cautious approach to their child transitioning, also known as a wait-and-see approach. This is another ridiculous thing that's been dreamed up. Whether the definition of change or suppression practices captures wait-and-see approaches depends on the circumstance of the case. The definition could capture serious examples of conduct that could be described as wait-and-see practice. For example, where a parent restricts to health professional advice and forces their 15-year-old child, whose gender identity is the opposite of their sex, to stay at home because the parent wants to wait until the child is 18 years old before seeking advice and considering medical treatment in relation to the child's gender identity. Well, that's wrong, isn't it? Doesn't the child have the right to seek medical advice and assistance? I would think they would. You know, and that child needs to be supported, because what are we then creating by denying the right of that child to get support on the journey that they're on? Maybe creating other mental health concerns, you know, and I've talked earlier about, we know that some people who've been denied support and made to feel that they're wrong or other or whatever it is, have suicided. That's what's at risk here. That is what is at risk. And so this is a welcome part of the bill. This needs to stop. And again, anyone who falls foul of this bill will end up in jail. The government is criminalising faith. Well, what a load of rubbish. How ridiculous. As I said earlier, you can pray, do whatever you like. Absolutely. Complete overreach. Complete overreach. This is about it being directed to a particular individual who has issues around their gender or sexual orientation. So if you are praying at somebody by saying you must repent or whatever it is, that's offensive, and that will be captured by the legislation as potentially as a practice that is about change or suppression. And I just might say, you know, the 2 minutes and 30 odd, whatever it is that I've got left, you know, there are many other examples. I mean, just this last one, and then I will finish on another one about the rubbish about not consulting. Parents should have the right to raise their children however they see fit. Every child likewise has a right to be free from harm, and LGBTIQ plus children are no different. Change or suppression practices do not work, they only cause harm to individuals, as I've said earlier. Furthermore, the bill does not prevent a parent from teaching their child the tenets of their faith or raising them in any way. It prevents parents from seeking to make their child change their sexual orientation or gender identity, such as by sending them to counselling sessions where they're told their identity is wrong and they must change. That's obvious, isn't it? Why? And again, why is it anyone's business about what someone's sexual orientation or... Well, exactly. I'm a parent, and actually my children's sexual identity and orientation is actually their own. You know, and if my children want to have a discussion with me about it, I'm open to it, but I let them initiate it. That's what I do as a parent, and I will support my children no matter what they do. It's not about me telling them what their sexual identity should be or how they should behave in that space. Their sexual identity and orientation is their own, and I would support them in that. And I know Mr Medic will have similar views and does have similar views in that regard in regard to his own children. And I'll just finish on this point in the minute that I have left. In terms of consultation, the government consulted extensively on this legislation, and including with faith groups. During the first round of consultations, the government received over 600 responses from the public to the online engagement form and over 80 written submissions. The government also led 21 face-to-face discussions, including with faith groups. Wow. We didn't consult, obviously, right? So there you go. That dispels that myth. So during the second round of consultations, the government met again with faith groups, and we have listened and engaged in those communities. And so, for example, one of the reasons why we now refer to these practices as change or suppression rather than conversion is because that was an objection raised by faith groups who spoke of the significance, the religious significance of that term. So again, Mr. Acting President, I would encourage members of the crossbench and others in this chambers to support this legislation today without amendment, vote against the amendments, but support this legislation. It's important. I'm a proud member of the Andrews Labor government today, and I stand in solidarity with every single member of the LGBTIQ+ community in Victoria today, and I commend this bill to the House without amendment.